How do you prepare for the future that doesn't yet exist? In the late 1960s and early 1970s, this wasn't just a hypothetical question at Royal Dutch Shell Corporation. It was a growing urgency. It was a business as usual and everything was going normal. The oil supply was steady and prices were okay. But somewhere in the offices of Royal Dutch Shell, a visionary strategist named Pierre Wack was not comfortable. He wanted to create multiple futures. He had an idea to create multiple futures and not depend on trend analysis that only predicts one future. He wanted to create scenarios, and that was the birth of scenario analysis in the corporate world. He assembled a team and he started working on plausible future scenarios that might exist or that might take place in future. He then created scenarios, and then there were two influential scenarios that he came up with. One was everything is normal, the oil prices are steady, there is predictability in the market and nothing changes. And the second plausible scenario he came up with was the oil industry erupts in crisis. There is absolutely chaos everywhere and no one knows what to do. He started then gathering all the leaders in the organization and asking them, what would we do if we were in a situation where OPEC crisis emerges, or oil reserves hit a low bottom, or there is disruption in the supply chain? They started coming up, the leaders started giving their responses as to how they would operate in different scenarios, different futures. And in 1973, the unimaginable happened. The OPEC oil embargo hit. Everything was chaotic. The oil prices quadrupled in practically overnight, in the matter of few hours, few days. The companies, the corporations, the industry, the firms in the oil sector did not know what to do. They were blindfolded. They had no option. They had no idea as to what needs to be done in this crisis, whereas the Royal Dutch Shell had scenarios planned. They had their futures ready and they had their strategies ready. They made adjustments to vendors, they made adjustments in their business models, and they also made adjustments to their supply chain. And at the end of this, Shell emerged not only stronger, but as a winner who would actually move from number 6 in the oil industry to number 2 in the leadership ladder. That is the power of scenario analysis. That is the power of foreseeing the future and being ready for the future. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chirag Gujarati, and I'm working in the management lab on the topic of enhancing future preparedness in the AEC sector, exploring scenarios and proactive measures. I come from a background of over a decade and a half in innovation, higher education, entrepreneurship, across Europe, India, and now in Australia. I am supervised by my able supervisors, Professor George Shinkle, sitting in the first row, and Dr. Nicole Gardner, sitting there. While we talk about scenario analysis, it is also important to understand that it is absolutely difficult and close to impossible to predict future accurately. Change is the only constant that we live in. How many of us work the same way that we used to work about 10, 20, 30 years ago? It constantly changes. Predicting future is difficult, And scenario analysis stretches our thinking. Scenario analysis is the tool that strategists advocate that helps us stretch our thinking to develop not only one possible future based on the trend, but develop multiple future scenarios and be ready for any uncertainty that might take place in future. The AEC sector is going through multiple uncertainties. We face multiple uncertainties, be it the advent of artificial intelligence, what we have just seen in last 4 or 5 years, the growth of artificial intelligence, the tools and the agents. There are growing regulations. There are mandates in sustainability. There is technological changes like AI and automation, which is constantly changing the industry and the environment. Every new project that we take up, every new assignment that we take up comes with environmental challenges. It is important that we understand these uncertainties, and there are choices that every firm has. We maintain the status quo, we react to the uncertainties, or we respond. We do nothing about it. We react once the uncertainty or the change happens, or we respond by being proactively ready for the changes that happens in future. For an example, uncertainty on the pace and impact of machine learning and AI will likely impact scenarios of the future. Now, we think AI is a thing that happened, just a few years ago, but in fact, the advent of AI was more than 7 decades ago, and it is predicted that we live in a world where soon we will have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which, of course, there are debates and discussions on how we will make it happen. But if that happens, when that happens, AGI is about the artificial intelligence having human-like cognitive understanding. So 10 years back, we were thinking about the AI or the automation will take up all the jobs that were monotonous or process driven. But we are moving towards a world where AI might do a lot of brain work that we have been doing. That brings me to the research questions, 2 major research questions that I am working on. What are the potential scenarios for the future of AEC sector? And what proactive measures should firms take to prepare for them? And under the umbrella of these 2 major research questions, there are other investigations that I would like to conduct, which include what are the different forces that impact the AEC sector, and what are the capabilities that lead to stronger future thinking and foresight. Third, how to leverage scenario analysis practice in design for scenario analysis in business. As the leaders in AEC sector, we have been using scenario analysis in our design process. The sector has been building buildings, infrastructures that last decades, centuries. Are we using the same foresight, the same scenario analysis in building the business that lasts for decades and centuries to come? And also, understanding AI's potential role in effective scenario analysis. Now, scenario analysis is not a straightforward, simple process. It does involve resources, time. It is a time-consuming and resource-driven process, but with the help of artificial intelligence, can we positively make the process more efficient, fast, accurate, unbiased, which is yet to be tested, but I'm interested in understanding how it can be used, AI can be used to leverage the process. The research progress so far, which has been about 16 months. I started my research journey about 4 months ago, and there were 2 major work or projects that happened. One was the literature review. There was an extensive literature review that happened, and We also had some initial interactions with our partner organizations, and the familiar faces are here. Through those two works, some research studies have been identified, and I intend to conduct certain experiments. Of course, these are not closed lab experiments, but some experiments where we can make foresight and scenario analysis more effective. The three research initiatives and engagements that I intend to work on: number one, laying a strong foundation for scenario analysis with partner organizations. Number two, actually getting onto the floor and perform the scenario analysis process. And engagement number three, where we, based on this scenario analysis, we try to come up with what proactive measures and capabilities we can develop to navigate the future uncertainties. To talk about the first engagement in detail, to lay the foundation for scenario analysis, I would like to understand the growth trajectories, strategic direction, and long-term aspirations of the partner organizations in our project. That will be done through interviews and surveys, which will, which probably will be starting very soon post the ethics application. The second engagement intervention would be scenario analysis to identify plausible future scenarios, what might happen in future, and what kind of futures we would be living in going forward. And this will be done collectively with partner organizations and also our peak bodies who are part of our project. We will conduct various interviews, workshops, and focus groups to come up with various scenarios for the future. Intervention 3, scenario planning is a choice. What do we do with the scenarios? It's up to you. It's up to us. If we want to maintain the status quo, we do nothing about it. But if we want to come up with a strategic response, we work to come up with proactive measures for the sector in general, and with individual partner organizations, because every partner organization, every firm has unique size, structure, industry focus, and aspirations. At the end, what I would like to accomplish after at the end of the research, three major outcomes. One, to have the future plausible scenarios portfolio, a curated set of future scenarios, proactive measures and capabilities framework, a strategic framework that partner organizations and the sector can use, that can help come up with critical capabilities to be better prepared for the future. And technological integration is to insights and recommendations on how we can adopt emerging technologies such as AI to support advanced scenario analysis and long-term strategic agility. Thank you, and I look forward to the research engagements with the partners. I invite questions and comments, please. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Is the microphone on? Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Great presentation, very clear. Somewhere near the end, you leapt from scenario analysis to scenario planning, which I think from the architectural perspective is the big one. Did you deliberately just sort of nimbly flip from one to the other because you haven't had a chance to get into it, or have you got some ideas what the planning might look like as a process?
So thank you for the question, sir. So the study 2 includes identification of future scenarios, and study 3 it talks about what do we do with the scenario to plan organization strategies based on the scenarios that we have developed in study 2. So from analysis, from identification of scenario to planning the proactive measures, the strategic response is the shift from study 2 to study 3. Now, when we talk about strategic response to identified scenarios, it is a strategic choice that every organization or the leadership makes. They would want to maintain the status quo. They would want to just let the scenarios be where they are, or they would want to be proactive and develop strategies and capabilities for the scenarios that might happen. So it's a shift from identifying scenarios to developing capabilities to manage these scenarios and the future uncertainties.
Oh, thanks. That's a great answer. I'm just following that up with it's a personal problem. So I don't like wearing it in the audience too much, but it's something called the risk register, because I loathe it with a vengeance, because of the fact that the risk that turns out to be the major risk was the one thing that wasn't thought about when the risk register was put together. So do you have thoughts about how you're going to plan kind of a weighting of the scenarios, the likelihood, and how you will filter out, or how you will decide when something is, through analysis, a potential pathway that you need to think about, but perhaps you haven't got enough bandwidth to do that?
Yeah. So thank you for raising that question. In fact, we can't wait for scenarios to happen because these are possible futures. They may or may not happen. Number one, I'm quite new in this journey, so I'm trying to figure out how to develop the measurement criteria to understand how effective the capabilities are, or how effective the proactive measures we have developed. But along the way, during the studies, I intend to develop certain KPIs, key performance indicators, where we will not wait for scenarios to happen because they may or may not happen, but we will try to evaluate whether the firm is ready to manage the change. Has the decision making improved in the time of uncertainties, and so on and so forth. So the plan is to design KPIs, key performance indicators, and see whether there is a change in decision making pattern and way of working in the organization.
You used the word plausible, and I wondered if you'd already thought about the measures for plausibility.
We are in the process of defining the scope of all elements of our studies, but we are, right now we haven't defined the scope of that term, but we will soon, because that's going to be the next step in the journey before we reach out to partner organizations and start developing scenarios. So that is an important step, and that is being being worked upon as we speak.
Is there a whole literature on that? Because I'm far from this scenario too. Can you research how you test plausibility?
Yes, there is. There is literature on how we can identify, measure the plausibility, but not an extensive work has happened. And I'm still in the process of identifying the relevant literature that guides us on how we can develop those parameters on testing the plausibility.
Great presentation and really interesting questions. And just to follow on from James, I'm curious as to whether there's, in scenario planning already, whether there's areas that you could focus on that might help rein in the scope of your PhD, because it's very big at the moment. So, is there something where it's sort of environmental scenarios, for instance, or political? That they're very different in their sort of, and whether sort of creating a bit of a boundary around those parameters might actually make it more manageable.
So, scenario analysis, there are a few frameworks that we use. One of the framework is PESTEL, where we consider political, economical, social, legal, technological, environmental, different aspects, and then we build scenarios. As of now, the good part of scenario analysis is you cannot limit the thought process when you are developing scenarios. You have to let all what if questions come out, and then based on that we kind of come up with the proactive measures. So yes, there are frameworks that we use, but we can't limit the scenarios to one specific discipline or domain. Of course, it depends on the size structure of the organization as well, if they and the industry that they focus on. If they want to specifically work on the technological side of scenarios, then we can have a focused discussion on what kind of technological scenarios can play a role in the future of the AEC sector. Yes.
Thank you. This is very interesting. Couple of points comes to my mind, and I don't know how you're going to answer those. It's like, if something is in the future on a philosophical level, like the technology might not happen yet. So how would you predict something that we don't know what it is even? So like, like working with the current technology, yes, you can project into the future, but talking about new emerging technology, for example, quantum computing, that we don't know what the effect of that might be, for example, makes a really big challenge. And I think also us as a human tend to work in a social groups. So if there's a hype in a society, everyone follows that. Also, but on the individual level, as an individual, I think that's the beauty of life, that we do things that once I quitted my job and went for a new job by tossing a coin, which was a silly or maybe a good decision. But that's what us as a human do. So predictability is.
It's very interesting question, and absolutely there is no predictability of future, and hence one of the slides said humanly it is impossible to predict what's going to happen in future. However, we are talking about being agile for whatever happens in future. It's not about identifying or evaluating whether what we predicted is right or wrong. It is about being ready for if something goes wrong or something goes right, are we in a good position to toss that coin or not? Right? So being more agile, being more flexible, having that agility and flexibility and resilience to the change that happens in future is the outcome that we are trying to arrive at, so that we may come up with 4, 10, 15, 20 different scenarios, but and they may not happen in future, but eventually the purpose is that if in preparation for that scenario we become more agile and resilient, and our decision making becomes more flexible, and hence we are at a level where or at a situation where if some sort of scenario takes place, whether it is in your list or not, you are ready to take the right decision.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Andrew.
Just piping into big negative about my business again. But what I really like about the connection between this research and the centre is that you've got potential access to the industry as a whole rather than individual businesses. And because I just want to point out that architects, engineers, and the businesses that exist within this industry, we're constantly in damage control, either putting up with losing too much work or winning too much work. We're always trying to respond to something, and there's usually a crisis 1 year after, be it a good crisis or a bad one. But what we don't do is we don't plan for industry-wide issues. and especially ones that can really affect these smaller architecture firms. And we usually take the stance that we haven't won this particular job and we're going to let off a certain percentage of staff. That's our easiest way of doing damage control. But the ethical side of that is, well, but we know Grimshaw has won the job and they need to hire 30 more staff to work on that metro station. So all these staff that are going back into that environment, there's work there for them. But I don't think there is someone thinking, well, there could be. It could be the Institute. But it'd be really good to make sure that some of this information and this crisis planning is going to those industry partners like the Institute and the smaller proponent. I've forgotten their name. Sorry. But ones that can protect the workers as a whole and plan for crises for them, because at the end of the day, then you're also helping protect potentially my job as well, right? So I just want to point that out and make sure that's not forgotten.
No, that's a brilliant suggestion, and I think you just gave me one scenario. Sitting here. So that's a good heads up to the next step in the research.
So just one more question before we close.
So I'm just imagining a scenario. You've got two partners, and you've given your presentation, and it's all about being proactively reactive by anticipating the unknown.
Yeah.
Right? But the other partner says, "Hey, we're too small for you to be dicking around with this. We want you to work out where we should be in 15 years' time and how we got there. And we'd like you to put the scenario together of arriving at that point and not fuss around hypotheticals. And you've got to defend your position." I'm just wondering if that would be a strategy to get the most out of what you're doing, is to make sure that you pit a rival point of view, which is, no, we're going to focus, we're going to make the future.
So there are two ways of looking at it. One, scenario analysis and planning. So developing scenario and doing something about it is a strategic choice that leadership in the organization makes, right? If a firm is happy with the progress that they have made in the past 15 years and would want to maintain a status quo, that is also a strategy to do nothing about a scenario, right? That is one strategic choice that one makes. But then a progressive, I shouldn't use the word progressive, a future-looking firm might think of understanding what the future has in store for us, and then be proactively react about, when things go right or wrong, how do we respond to those scenarios. So it is an absolutely, it's a choice that the leadership makes or the firm makes, whether to invest time, money, resources into scenario analysis and planning or not. But having said that, there are merits in investing in scenario analysis, because we just looked at one example of how Shell, in the situation where the competitors were blindfolded in the chaos, and when the OPEC was burning, because Shell had thought about those scenarios and they had the measures ready when things go wrong, what would we do? They probably, and it's not just one reason, because they had scenarios, they probably had multiple other strategies as well, but because they had the scenario planning done, and it is very evident in the literature that we read, they had the upper hand when things went wrong. So there is merit in planning for future.
Thank you. I'm coming back.
All right.
Thank you, Chirag.
Thank you very much. Thank you.